Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tefillah. We pick up today on Kuf Lamed Ches Amid Beis, Siman Kuf Yud Sif Beis. So we are beginning 4 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch with Sif Beis. We begin today to discuss the halacha of payalim, laborers, people who are being paid for their labor, they're being paid for their time, and now there's a question of davening. They have to daven, but at the same time, their time is hired out to their employer. So what are they allowed to take time for? What are they mechuyev to take time for? And what can they not take time for? Says the Mechaber Sif Beis, HaPayalim she'osin malacha etzel bal habayis, laborers who do work by their employer. So it depends. If the only thing that they get paid is their food, they work and they receive a meal. That's what they're getting paid. In that case, says the Mechaber, mispalel and Shemone Esrei, then they daven a full Shemone Esrei. So we're talking about what the pile is going to daven for Shachris. The Iker, we're not talking about Kriya Shema now. We're talking about the Chiyuv of Tefillah. The Iker Chiyuv of Tefillah is Shemone Esrei. So the Payil who works for an employer, and this employer is only giving him his meal, he's not paying him anything more than that, he could daven a full Shemone Esrei. Aval, however, Ein Yordin Lifnei HaTeva, he can't daven for the Amud, because if he's going to daven for the Amud, he's going to have to say Shemone Esrei twice. He's going to daven his own Shtil Shemone Esrei, and then he's going to have to do a Chazaras HaShatz. It's going to take more time. Ve'ein noisid kapeim, and if he's a Kayan, he can't wait around for Duchening. He can't wait for Berchas Kayanim, because again, it's going to take more time. But he does daven a full Shemone Esrei. Ve'im noisid lehem schar, but if he's working for an employer who actually pays him a wage, besides giving him meals, he pays him a wage, mispalelin havinenu, then he does not daven a full Shemone Esrei. Instead, he davens the abridged Shemone Esrei that we learned about last week, the Tefillah of Havinenu. Let's just remember what Havinenu is. You would recite the first 3 brachas of Shemone Esrei in their entirety. So the bracha of Avos, that begins with the beginning of Shemone Esrei and concludes with Magen Avram. The bracha of Gevurais, which is the bracha of B'chai Mesim, begins Ato Gibar and ends B'chai Mesim. And the bracha of Kedusha, which begins Ato Kadosh and ends Hakel Kadosh. So you would say those 3 brachas in their entirety. Then you would insert the bracha of Havinenu. We read the text of Havinenu last week. It's a nusach that incorporates the concepts of all of the middle 13 brachas of Shemone Esrei, and it ends with Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah, and then he would say the last 3 brachas of Shemone Esrei in their entirety, and that would be the bracha of Avodah, that begins with Recite and ends Hamach Zeshinas L'Tzion, the bracha of Haidah that begins with Maidim and ends Hatov Shimcha L'Chana L'Haidais, and the bracha of Shalom that begins Sim Shalom and ends Hamavar Chesama Yisrael B'Shalom. So again, what did we say over here in the Mechaber? The Mechaber said a laborer, so his time is being paid for by an employer. How much can he daven? Says the Mechaber, it depends what he's getting paid. If he's only getting a meal for his time, then he could daven a full Shemone Esrei. And as the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us, that's because if the employer is only giving him a meal, then we feel that the employer is not so makpid on the time of the laborer that he would not allow him to daven Shemone Esrei. So he could daven a full Shemone Esrei, but he can't daven for the Amid, and if he's a Kayan, he can't do Berchas Kayanim. If he's actually getting a wage, now we assume that the employer is more makpid on his time, and therefore he cannot take the time to daven a full Shemone Esrei. Instead, he could only daven Havinenu. The implication over here seems to be that the employer is within his rights to be makpid. Like this, you might say to yourself, what kind of from employer is not going to let his employee daven? It seems from here that the lumdus is the employer is paying for the time of the laborer. And if he's paying for the time of the laborer, he is entitled to get as much time as he could out of the laborer. As far as the laborer is concerned, if his employer is makpid, well, in that case, the laborer is under a shasat chak. He's considered to be under pressing circumstances. He has a boss that's makpid on his time. So then it falls under the rubric of Sif Aleph, where the Mechaber told us b'shasat chak, a person can daven havinenu. So again, from the perspective of the employer, I'm paying for this laborer's time. I have a right to be makpid. From the perspective of the laborer, listen, if my boss is makpid, it's a shasat chak. And that's why he would either daven just Shemone Esrei if he's getting a meal, or just havinenu if he's getting a wage. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is katleches. Mispalelin Shemone Esrei, shalosh pa'amim b'chol 3 times a day, shachris milcha ma'ariv, kishar kolodam, like everybody else. Why? She'ein ha'balabayis makpid bi'ikuvan, because we assume that the balabayis is not so makpid on the amount of time it's going to take to daven Shemone Esrei, kevan she'ein enois alem schar, since he's not paying these laborers a wage, he's just giving them a meal. He's contest aval ein, but he can't be yared l'ftei HaTorah, he can't daven for the amud. Shezeu ikav gadol umakpid, because that already is going to take a lot of time, and on that the balabais would be makpid. Ois katan yud, however, if the employer is actually paying a wage, v'im noisein, if he's giving a wage, in that case he davens havinenu, explains the Mishnah Berurah, ki oz makpid a-balabais, when the balabais is actually paying a wage, then he's more makpid on the time of the laborer, im yisakvu lehispal kol Shemone Esrei, he's makpid that the laborer should not take the time to daven a full Shemone Esrei, v'avalhu l'payalun k'shasat chak, and then it becomes a shasat chak for the laborers, the chanal, and then it falls under the rubric that we saw earlier of Sif Aleph. He's cutting Yod Aleph, havinenu, he davens havinenu, and the Mishnah Berurah reminds us, v'hainu dafka b'may sachama, you can only daven the tefillah of havinenu during the spring, summer. You can't daven havinenu during the winter, because during the winter we need to insert v'sein talumat l'vracha, and there's no mechanism to insert v'sein talumat l'vracha in the tefillah of havinenu, the chanal b'sif aleph. Okay, let's finish off Sif Beis here. Says the Mechaber, v'ha'idna, nowadays, ein derech l'hakpid b'kach. The Mechaber says, already in his time, it was not the derech for an employer to be makpid on his Yiddish employee and not allow him to daven a full Shemone Esrei. Umistama, and therefore the default position, the assumption is, adaita dahachi maskirin aisam, that it is with this das in mind that the employer hires his Yiddish laborer, sheyispalalu Shemone Esrei, to allow him to daven a full Shemone Esrei, even if he pays him a wage. Ois kan yud beis, sheyispalalu Shemone Esrei, v'huadin kol nusach atfila kishar kaladam. And indeed, nowadays, says the Mishnah Berurah, the laborer could daven a full davening just like everybody else. Full Berachas HaShachar, full Psukei Zimra, full Berachas Kriyishma, full Shemone Esrei, everything. V'kotzav alechem chamudos, to adin shemutar b'leilach l'beis hakneses l'hispal ba'asara. Then nowadays, the laborer could even leave to go to shul to daven with the minyan and get tefillah b'tzibur. V'ayim b'magen Avram, take a look at the Magen Avram, d'zeh dafka b'makom she'ein derech balabatam l'hakpid b'kach. The Magen Avram points out that this concept, that the laborer could actually go to shul to get a minyan, that's only if you know that in that locale, employers are not makpid. And nevertheless, even if we're going to say that he could go to shul and daven b'tzibur, still ein yardin l'ftei HaTorah, he still can't daven for the amud to do chazaras hashatz. Kein kasav apri begadim. Ubepri chadash yisa the idno yardin gam ke l'ftei HaTorah. Pri chadash says that nowadays a laborer can even daven for the amud. V'nira li, Chavetz Chaim says it appears to him to ein lahachmir im al yidei zelo yisachar azman yoser, that there's no reason to be machmir and say that the laborer cannot daven for the amud unless it's going to take a significant amount of time. Okay, let's go weiter to Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber. Ha'hoilech b'mkaim gedudei chaya v'listim. If somebody's traveling in a dangerous locale, either it's a place with our gedudei chaya, there are groups of wild animals, v'listim, or two-legged animals. There are gangsters. So now this person is traveling in a bad neighborhood, and he has to daven. What should he do? To stop and daven doesn't seem to be an eitzah. You're not in a safe place. Says the Mechaber, Mispalel Tzarchei Amcha Merubim, he should recite the very, very abridged Tefillah of Tzarchei Amcha Merubim. I'll read you the text in a moment. And in that case, the Einoi Tzarech Loy L'Shalosh Rishonos V'Loy L'Shalosh Acharonos. The Tefillah of Tzarchei Amcha is very different than Havinenu. By Havinenu, we're reciting the full first three brachas of Kriya Shema and the full last three brachas of Kriya Shema with Havinenu in the middle. With the Tefillah of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, all you're going to recite is the text of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. We're not going to say the Gimel Rishonos and the Gimel Achronos. So again, this person is traveling in a dangerous place. Says the Mechaber, he should daven the Tefillah of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, and continues the Mechaber, and he says, he could recite the Tefillah of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha on the road while he is walking. He's not mechuyev to stop at all. Just keep on going and say the Tefillah of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. If you could stop for a moment, for the short amount of time it takes to say Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, then in a chirami it is better to stop if you can. But if you feel that you can't, just keep going. And then, ukishiyagil yishuv, when you reach your destination, when you reach a safe place, v'tiskar daitoi, and you calm down, you're out of danger, chayzer u'mispal, Teffilas HaDerech brachas. When you arrive at a safe destination, now, even though you already davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, Merubim Tzarchei Amcha is such an abridged tefillah that it does not take the place of Shemone Esrei. So, you were traveling, and you're worried about Siman Tefillah. You don't know how long it's going to take you to get to your destination. You have a chiyuv of Tefillah. You can't stop. So, daven Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. Now, if you arrive at a safe destination, and it's still early enough that you could daven, it's still before Siman Tefillah, so now go ahead and daven a regular Shemone Esrei once you had a chance to calm down. Says the Ramah, V'im loy chazar lehispalel. Let's say the guy was traveling. He said Merubim Tzarchei Amcha while he was traveling in the bad neighborhood. He got to his safe destination, and now he was supposed to go ahead and daven Shemone Esrei, but he forgot. And he only remembers after Zman Tefillah. Says the Ramah, Hevek ilu shachach lehispalel legamri. This is the same din as somebody who totally forgot to daven. In other words, we're not machshiv the tefillah of Merubim Tzarchei Amcha at all, in the context of whether or not he has to go ahead and daven over again. So again, what is this halacha? The person is davening he's traveling in a terrible neighborhood. There's no way he could daven. It's not safe for him to stop, and even if he would stop, there's no way he could put his das, there's no way he could put his mind on the davening. So we have a major kula. The kula is daven Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. So let's say you daven Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, and then you arrive at your destination after Zman Tefillah. We're not going to look at it as a mu'uvas l'yuchal liskain. We're not going to look at it as somebody who skipped davening, which the Gemara says that's what the pasuk in Kehelas is talking about. When the pasuk in Kehelas says mu'uvas l'yuchal liskain, a twisted thing that cannot be repaired, that's somebody who does not daven at all during this Zman Tefillah. It's something that can never be made up. But this person davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. That's the kula that we give him. He could be yoytze tefillah with the tefillah Merubim Tzarchei Amcha. However, if he arrives at his destination where it's safe and it's still before Zman Tefillah, so now he should go ahead and he should daven Shemone Esrei. What if he forgot to daven Shemone Esrei? We know a normal person, if he forgets to daven Shemone Esrei of Shachris, he davens a Tashlubim by Mincha. But what's the din by this person? This person davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, then he was supposed to daven Shemone Esrei when he arrived at his destination. He forgot to daven Shemone Esrei when he arrived at his destination. But he did daven Merubim Tzarchei Amcha while he was on the road. What's his halacha? Says the Ramah, he has to daven a Tashlumin, because Merubim Tzarchei Amcha does not fit the bill. It's a major kula that you could be yotzet with Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, but still you should daven a Tashlumin if you forgot to daven Shemone Esrei when you arrived at your destination. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kod Yud Gimel, this person is traveling in an area where there are Gedudei Chaya V'listim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the point is, Levishaaz Eina Meyushav Daita Klal. This person, his mind is not settled whatsoever. There's no way that he's going to be able to have das on his davening. And that's why we're so makel for this person. We don't even tell him to daven avinenu. We tell him to daven merubim tzarchei amcha. But he should daven over again a full Shemone Esrei when he arrives at his destination. Hainu im loy avar adayin zmana, as long as you haven't reached Saif Zman Tefillah. If it's already after Saif Zman Tefillah, you can't daven anymore. The Ramah said, what if he, the Mechaber said, the Ramah said that if he did not daven a full Shemone Esrei when he got to his destination before Saif Zman Tefillah, what's the halacha? Return Aloymar, after his Spal Tefillah Kitzara, even though he davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, Keman the Lesa Damya, it's as if he didn't daven anything, Le'inyan Etzem Mitzvah Tefillah, as far as being Yotzem the Mitzvah Tefillah. The Chayv La'ashlima B'Tefillah Hasmucha, and therefore he still has to daven a Tashlumin, U'kedalael B'Siman Kov Ches. But this is only if he forgot to daven the full Shemone Esrei when he got to his destination. He forgot, it was b'shoigig. Either he didn't daven the full Shemone Esrei because he didn't know this halacha, he didn't know he was mechuyev to, or he forgot, or it already was up to Saif Zman Tefillah, and he couldn't daven when he got home. In all of those cases, he should daven a tashlumin. But if he davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha while he was on the road, and then when he arrived at his destination, he decided that b'mezid he's not davening Shemone Esrei, then avalim b'mezid lo yispal harehu mu'ovis she'ena yuchal liskain, and then there's no tashlumin. V'em avaz man shnei tfilos b'derech v'hotzrich l'hispal tfilah k'tzara. Let's say somebody was traveling in an unsafe place and he davened Merubim Tzarchei Amcha for Shachris, and then he came to Saif Zman Tefillah, and he's still traveling. So now he davens Merubim Tzarchei Amcha for Mincha, and now he arrives at a location during the Zman of Ma'ariv. Ein Tashlumin l'Tefillah Rishona. He can daven a Tashlumin for Mincha, but he can't daven a Tashlumin for Shachris, because already for that, it is too late. Pardon the bottle. I have to lubricate my throat, as you can tell, and unfortunately I don't have a cup here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol b'dvarim. Okay, now we go to Sif Dalid, and we begin to learn the halachas of Teffilas HaDerech. Says the Mechaber Sif Dalid, 2 lines off the bottom, Koflam Ches Amud Beis, last word on the line. Hayotzei LaDerech. Somebody who's going to travel on the road. Yispalel, he should daven Teffilas HaDerech. He should say, Yi ratzon milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu shetoilichenu l'shalom. And the Mechaber does not give the full text for Teffilas HaDerech. Well, I'll read to you the full text of Yirtzeh Hashem, but right now let it suffice that the Mechaber says when you go to travel, you should be mispalel Teffilas HaDerech, which is something which comes from the Gemara in Brachos, Chav Tes Amud Beis and Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. Continues the Mechaber, and the Mechaber says, V'tzarech la'amra b'loshain rabim. When you daven Teffilas HaDerech, you should phrase it using Loshen Rabim, the plural, not the singular. So it should be Yihir outside Mofanecha Hashem Lekeinu v'Lekevisenu Shetoilichenu L'Shalom, that we should travel in peace. Shetoilichenu, you should help us travel in peace, not Shetoilicheni, that you should help me travel in peace, in the singular. We don't do it in the singular, we do it in Lashon Rabim, so that we're not only davening for ourselves, but we're davening for all our fellow travelers as well. So that's V'tzarech l'amra b'loshain Rabim. V'im efsher, and if possible, says the Mechaber, Yamoid milelech kisha yom rena, you should stop in place, and you should stop traveling while you're reciting Teffilas HaDerech. If you're riding on an animal, ein sarich lereid, you're not mechuyev to get off of the animal. Stop the animal if you can, and daven Teffilas HaDerech while you remain in place, but you're not mechuyev to actually get off the animal. Okay, let's go back to Kufla V'Ches on the base, Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tes Zayin. Hayotzei l'derech. This halacha applies to somebody who's now leaving on a journey. He's embarking on a journey. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Zeh Mayri, this Sif in the Shemone Esrei is talking about a case, Afilo Achar Shekvar Espal Shemone Esrei. Even if you already daven Shacharis. In other words, the point of the Mishnah Berurah is that till now, we were talking about somebody who was traveling, and he has to daven Shacharis. So the question was, if he's traveling in a dangerous area, could we abridge his Shemone Esrei? We said we abridge his Shemone Esrei to Merubim Tzarchei Amcha, which I just realized I didn't read the text to you. The text of that tefillah is as follows. Tzarchei Amcha Merubim. The needs of your nation are many. V'daitam kitzara. And their knowledge is lacking. Yehi ratzain mofanecha Hashem Elokeinu. It should be your will before you, Hashem our God. Shetite l'chol echad ve'echad. That you should grant each and every person kedei parnasasai, what he needs for his parnasa, for his sustenance, ulechol gevia ugevia de machsara, and for every guf, for every body, what it needs for its sustenance. V'atoiv be'einecha asay, and what is good in your eyes you should do. Baruch atah Hashem shamei tefillah. So that's the abridged tefillah of Tzarchei Amcha Merubim that we were speaking about in the previous sif. Now that we're talking about Teffilas HaDerech, the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out in Ois Katan Tes Zayin that the chiyuv of Teffilas HaDerech is totally independent of the chiyuv of davening Shemone Esrei, of davening Shacharis. You might think, I daven Shacharis. Now I'm going traveling on the road. I have to have a special tefillah for the Teffilas HaDerech. I already daven Shacharis. Yes, there's a special tefillah for when you embark on a journey. Ois Katan Yud Zayin, the proper text of Teffilas HaDerech is Shetoilichenu L'Shalom, that you should help us travel in peace, but L'Shalom, not B'Shalom. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he points out, this is brought down from the Gemara in Brachas of Samach Daled Amud Aleph, Haniftar Mechaveroi, when somebody takes leave of his friend, Al Yomer Lo Lech B'Shalom, he should not say to him, Lech B'Shalom, Ela Lech L'Shalom. When you take leave of a living person, you tell him, Lech L'Shalom. You should go forward in peace. Ugesheniftar bin a mace, when you take leave of a niftar, when you're standing by somebody who has passed away, and now you're taking leave of the niftar, of the body, then you say, Yomer B'Shalom. Then you say, Lech B'Shalom, go in peace, not go forward in peace. V'atam ayin soif brachas, and you can see the reason in brachas Samach Daled, be'en Yaakov, b'hakosiv, u'v'maharsha. Ois Katan Yud Ches, v'tzarech, the Mechaber said that we should use a Lashon Rabim, not a Lashon Yachid, u'b'di'evid yotza afilu im avar kol hanusach b'Lashon Yachid, b'di'evid, you are yotzet Teffilas HaDerech, even if you recited Teffilas HaDerech b'Lashon Yachid. Ois Katan Yud Tes la'amra, it's proper to say it b'lashon rabim. Pirish kol nusach shel Teffilas HaDerech. The entire text of Teffilas HaDerech should be recited in lashon rabim. Because by doing so, your tefillah will be more acceptable in Shemayim. Whenever we're mispal for some other people, together with ourselves, our tefillah is more makubal in Shemayim. It's not a selfish tefillah. I'm not only davening for myself, I'm davening for others as well. Ub'shem sefer hakana kasu demilas usineni lechein yarma b'lashon yachid, that at the end of Teffilas HaDerech, when we say, nowadays most people say b'lashon rabim, v'sitneinu, and you should place us lechein u'lechesed u'lerachimim. No, I've got the nusach wrong. Here, let me get the nusach for you. You know what? It's faster like this. No. Teffilas HaDerech. Okay. Yiratzon milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokeinu Aviseinu shetoilichenu l'shalom. You should have us travel forward in peace. V'satzidenu l'shalom, v'sadrichenu l'shalom, v'sagienu l'mechayis cheftzenu. You should have us reach the destination of our choice. L'chayim u'l'simcha u'l'shalom. So this is all b'lashon rabim. V'satzilenu, and you should save us. B'kavkal oyev v'oyev v'lista v'chayis rois b'derech. You should save us from enemies, from ambushes, from gangsters, from chayis rois on the way. Ub'kal mine peranios, from all types of punishments. Hamisrakshois lavei la'olam, that come during the way of the world. V'sishlach bracha b'chamasi yadenu. You should send bracha in our Masi Yadenu, in the accomplishments of our hands. Again, Lashon Rabim Yadenu, V'sitneinu, and you should give us over, L'cheinu l'chesed l'rachamim, for grace, for kindness, for mercy, Be'einecha, in your eyes, U'be'einei karayenu, and in the eyes of all that see us, V'sishma kel tachadunenu, you should accept and listen to the voice of our entreaties, again, Lashon Rabim, Kikel Shemet Tefillah V'Sachdonata. So everything that we're asking for, we're asking b'Lashon Rabim. The Mishnah Berurah points out over here that the Sefer HaKana says that all the way at the end, instead of V'sitneinu L'cheinu L'chesed L'rachamim, the Sefer HaKana had the Girsa V'usineini in the singular. Most people seem to say it b'Lashon Rabim. This hakpada, that when you daven, you should daven b'lashon rabim and not in the singular, is only when we're reciting a nusach of tefillah that's kavua l'rabim, an accepted text of tefillah that the rabim uses. Everybody who travels says Teffilas HaDerech. Everybody davens Shemone Esrei. So in all of these kinds of tefillas, we always use a lashon rabim. Aval, however, if somebody wants to offer up to the Rebbeinu Shalom his own personal tefillah and bakasha for something, somebody's going through a hard time, he wants to look up to Shemayim and he wants to compose his own tefillah to ask the Rebbeinu Shalom for help, Ein sarach lehispal b'lashon rabim, he does not have to do that b'lashon rabim. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, and he gives us some eitzes, some good advice for traveling, and traveling safely. V'yasek b'Torah b'derech. You should be Isaac b'Torah when you're traveling. That way you'll have the shmira of Torah. Ukvar Amru, and indeed, we already have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, Hamahalech b'derech, if somebody's traveling on the road, which is known as being in a matzav of sakana, umafda libay levatala, and he turns his heart away to nonsense, to divrei batala, mischayiv benafshay. He carries the guilt of his life on his hand. Why? Because he's traveling, which is a sakana. He should be Isaac b'Torah to get the shmira of Torah. Instead, he's turning his heart away to dvarim b'telim. So he's bedafka giving up the shmira. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, avaloya ayin bahalacha but you shouldn't get involved in learning be'iyun in depth, dilma osili itrude, because you'll get caught up in your learning and you'll miss the exit. Or maybe worse, you won't pay attention to traffic. The Kosev Magen Avraham, the Magen Avraham writes, Efsher, it's possible to be Yoshev Ba'agola, that if you're sitting on a wagon, Vish Acher Manig, and somebody else is driving the wagon, Manig Asusim, somebody else is controlling the horses and driving the wagon, Shari Afilu Iyun. Then maybe you could learn even Be'iyun. Because what's the problem if you're going to be Torrid? You're not doing anything anyway. It's the driver that's doing everything. Oid Mashma B'Gemara, it's also implied in the Gemara, the Mahalach Baderech Tzarech Lahariv Atzmai Ma'at. When you go out to embark on a journey, you should do some intermittent fasting. Don't travel on a full stomach. Ki asviya kasha oz l'me'ayim mipnei Tarech HaDerech. Because traveling on a full stomach could be hard for the stomach. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. The Yizar, this is very, very practical, Rabbi say. Very, very practical advice from the Chavetz Chaim here that people really should take to heart. The Yizar kol adam, everybody should take care, sheyeh loy pas, literally that they should have bread. I would say nowadays at least a snack. Afilu holich b'makom karoiv u'v'makom d'shchiach pas. Even if you're taking a short little trip and you think you're driving through inhabited areas where you could always jump into a store to get something, doesn't matter. Have something with you in the car. Because things happen on the road. We've all had those times where we were stuck for an hour and a half, even 2 hours in standstill traffic because a truck flipped over or who knows what happened. And sometimes that could lead to a sakana. There have been cases where people were trapped in the freezing cold. Maybe their car stalled. And meantime, it's 5 below outside, and they're in their shirt sleeves because they didn't take a coat with them. They thought that they're going for a 45-minute drive. The car has heat. Well, I'm going from my house into the car. Where I'm going, I'm parking the car, walking straight into my friend's house. What do I need a coat for? Now they get stuck in traffic, and maybe the car dies, so they don't have heat. And they're stuck for hours and hours and hours on the road. Rahman al-Tzlan, the person could really be in sakana. So the Chavetz Chaim is giving us practical advice. Have a snack with you in the car. If it's cold outside, have a coat with you in the car. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, and he says, V'nochain, and it is proper l'chol yirei shamayim, for all yirei shamayim, beis yitziyasei l'derech, that when they go out on the road, sheyikach yimay atalas u'tfilin shaloi, they should bring their talis and tefillin with them. Afilu hu naisei l'makom karoiv, even if you're only traveling a short distance, v'daitar lachzar hayom, and you're planning on returning today. Pen yikra eze mikra, maybe something will happen. V'yispatel mi mitzvah, and it'll lose out on the mitzvah of talis and tefillin. So obviously the Chavetz Chaim is not addressing somebody who's going to ShopRite. And I don't think he's addressing somebody who's going, in mid-morning or mid-afternoon, and he's driving from Lakewood to Borough Park, that he has to take his talis and tefillin with him. It would be very, 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 very much min hanimna that he shouldn't be able to make it back to Lakewood, for Shacharis tomorrow morning. But when you're going on a significant journey, if I go away for Shabbos, even if I'm planning on coming back Motzei Shabbos, I go away for Shabbos, I take my talis and tefillin with me. If I'm going for a long trip during the day, I remember one time I had to go to Scranton for something. And I wasn't leaving to Scranton until the afternoon. I wasn't leaving at 9 o'clock in the morning. I took my talis and tefillin with me. And guess what? I got stuck in Scranton overnight. So I had my talis and tefillin the next day. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ba'avoneseinu Rabim, Yesh Oivrei Drachim, there are people who travel, She'ein Loichin Iman Afilu Tefillin, they don't even bring their tefillin with them. V'Soimchin Atzman, Shabaderech Yishalom Me'acherim, and they rely on their ability to borrow tefillin from other people on the road. Fa'avoinam Gadol, he says it's a great avera. Ki harbe pa'amim matzu isha yidei ze oivrim zman kriya shema tefillah. Many times because of this, they miss Zman Kriya Shema, they miss Zman Tefillah, because they go to shul in the morning. This over here already sounds like the Chavetz Chaim is talking about somebody who knows that he's not going to be back for Shacharis, and he still doesn't bring his tefillin. So he's relying on borrowing tefillin. Meantime, he comes to shul the next morning. He's busy looking for a pair of tefillin. Meantime, he misses Zman Kriya Shema, he misses Zman Tefillah. And furthermore, there's another reason it's a problem. They end up using whatever tefillin they get their hands on. And they don't pay attention to whether or not the shalroish really fits on their head. Remember, if it's not made the right size and the roish drops down, you're not yoitza. So you need tefillin really to fit you. So he says, you're traveling, bring your tefillin. The Mechaber said that you daven Teffilas HaDerech, and he says, if possible, if it's possible to, im efsher yamay milelech kisha yemrena. You should stop from traveling while you recite Teffilas HaDerech. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'im efsher kigoyin shechavrusim amtenes. If you're traveling together with other people and they're willing to wait for you. So if they're willing to wait a minute while I say Teffilas HaDerech, ask them to wait. Chav Beis, yamoid milelech, you should stop from traveling. Im ikov amidasar yatridai, but if stopping is going to make him agitated, he's in a rush. I can't stop now. I just got on the road. I finally got on the road. I can't stop now to say Teffilas HaDerech. If that's what's going to happen, you could say Teffilas HaDerech while you're traveling, while you're sitting, it doesn't matter. If you're on an animal, you're not mechuyev to get off. Because having to get off the animal and get back on the animal is a tirda. And we don't want you to have that tirda. Better say Teffilas HaDerech while you're on the animal when you're ruig and you have a calm frame of mind. If you could stop the animal from traveling, stop. Because when you're riding and you're moving, it's as if you are mahalach. Same thing applies to somebody who's sitting in a wagon. You don't have to get out of the wagon. If you could stop the horses, it would be better to stop the horses. I'm going to stop over here because I really want to continue, but my voice is just going out on me. So I'm going to stop over here. Maybe, if possible, I'll record a short share later just to finish the Dirshu page. Let's see. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah. Shemone Esrei, I got Klal Yisrael, the Baruch should send Yeshua Sefuras Parnasset Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Goel Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.